Okay, well, hello. My name is Hannah Robinson.
And I'm Lindsay Sparks.
Okay, so for our discussion today, I'm going to be the group lead, and it's basically about the CRC article, about the article that's trying to be passed in the UN. And so there are just a few focus questions I guess we can kind of talk about here. Um, But what were your impressions of the CRC article and video by the United Nations? And what about the article and the videos by parental rights?
Um, Something that I was thinking about, like while I was reading the article, and it all sounds well and good, just like in the video of the two women talking to Mr. Crawford. I can't remember his first name. His last name was Crawford, in his little show. And I was thinking while I was watching the videos and reading the thing from the UN, I was thinking, the United States already has all these things in place, like protection of children and protection of uh, not necessarily children's rights, but at least to protect them from harm and things of that nature. And they they all have a right to education, which are the same things that the CRC is trying to get for nations worldwide. And those are good things, but then like I started thinking about some of the things that the ladies were saying on the show about how it would just totally take away all of the state legislature that we already have. And that to me is it's pretty hard to think about, just because a lot of the things like adoption agencies and things that are state run. and I thought it was interesting what they said too in their little video about how many kids go through a rebellious stage, and so they could question your every parental move. And I just thought that was really interesting. And then they also talked about how they have a right to like sexual education, and a parent can't say no, I don't want my kid to have that, or I don't want I don't want it to be taught at the school, because lots of parents like opt out of their kid taking those type of classes just because they want to teach them themselves. And like I'm kind of one of those people where I would probably opt my children out of something like that, just because like I would want to teach them in my own way. Like I would still want them to have the knowledge about it, but I would want them to have me teaching them, so it's not like a worldly view
Mm-hmm.
without emotion, because I think it's really an emotional thing, and especially in the gospel. So I kind of see where they're coming from with that as well. What are your thoughts?
I had the exact same sort of thoughts when I was watching the video. I mean, it's amazing. Like, you're sitting there and you're watching, like, these children go through these horrible situations, and you're saying, yes, like, I want to help these children. Like, I don't want there to be child prostitution. I don't want there to be child slavery and children doing labor that's extremely abusive.
Or sent
Uh,
to war and stuff like that, but that doesn't happen in America. Like we don't send our kids to war.
right. So, um, I think it's kind of really interesting because I can understand where they're coming from, saying we need to protect children. And there are adults in the world and parents in the world who do not treat their children with the love and care that they deserve. I know that there's been some health issues in Africa with these women who are getting married off really early, and they're ending up having very severe health problems because of it. And their husband basically abandons them, and their families like send them off in this little hut. They're just like embarrassed by them. And I remember sitting there and being like, someone needs to do something. Like the government needs to do something, like step in there. So I understand like partly where they're coming from. Like we need to protect these children's rights throughout the whole world. But what they're not understanding is that in the United States, like what you said, like we have a lot of the laws that are already in place to protect children. So what they need to be doing is they need to be talking to the government specifically and saying, okay, this is what you need to put in place to help protect your children. Are you against this happening? Then you should put this in place rather than an international law that umbrellas all other laws under that country. I agree. I think for us it would be a very harmful thing, like what they were saying in the interview. It was just with those two women. It was just like it is literally taking away our rights as parents, and that's such a scary thing. I think I heard of a case, and this was actually even in the United States, so it's even being questioned in the United States, where a girl decided to sue her parents because they wouldn't pay for her college education. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I agree. I think it's something that's very scary to think that under international law, um, a child in a rebellious stage who doesn't want to go to church can go to this building and say, "Hey, I don't want to go to church, and my parents are pretty much like forcing me to go to church," and they can have legal consequences.
And I think that's out of control because, I mean, to be honest, all kids do that. I did that. I mean, when I was like 13 and 14, and I was like, I don't want to go to church. I'm a teenager. I wanted to sleep. I didn't want to go to 9 a.m. church, and I was like, no, Mom, I'm not going. And she's like, yes, you are. And I mean, that's just how it goes. That's every household. You can't do a law that just totally overrides like the parents and the family values, and parents set those family values, and you have to teach your children, and you can't just let them do whatever they want. And that's the thing that I fear will come from this treaty is like kids will realize that, hey,
They
I don't want to do it, they can't force me. And I think that's bad because then it's just undermining all parent authority, and then it's like, well, who's the authority? And it's not like the government is sitting in there on the thing. Like, I think I worry about, things like teenage pregnancy and, things like that just skyrocketing because parents don't have any control over what their kids are doing anymore, which is kind of weird because it's like, these are my children. I want what's best for them. I know them better than the government does. I gave birth to them. I mean, it's like, I don't understand why the government feels the need to like, or not just the government, but like this international treaty, or feels the need. And even the government now, I mean, like you were saying, and like those women were saying about the cases that have happened, like why they feel the need to specifically go against what the parents want. I mean, my parents didn't pay for my college education, but there's no, like, it's not their job or their responsibility to. Up until recently, I mean, college education wasn't even, like, mandatory. Like, not everyone went to college. It's not like it's mandatory. Actually, my husband and I have even talked, like, made the decision that we probably won't pay for our child's college education. At least not completely. I mean, we might help them out a little, but I mean, they at that point of college, there needs to be some responsibility. You're an adult at that point. So I mean, if that's what I think that is just super weird about the college education thing.
right, and um, I guess I wanted to pose a question. So if, like what you were saying, so if I as a parent want my child to go to church, and so there's a little bit of like, okay, like this is something that we do as a family. This is a family rule. We go to church. That's what we're gonna do. What would you say in communities um, where going to church would instead be something like terrorism, like a terrorist group? Like this is something we do as a family. You are gonna do this. In a situation where the parents say, you need to marry this older gentleman that will give us lots of money when you are 12 years old. So, like, you understand what I'm saying? Because I understand what they're trying to get after, but is there a better way to do it than to force an umbrella law that covers much more than these specific cases?
That's a really good question, and I kind of like when you're talking about family values as in like the terrorism thing.
Hmm.
It's that's really like how would you really combat something like that other than the government telling them that that's not okay. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, you're always going to have those people. Just like you're always going to have people who are just nasty, mean, disgusting human beings that just don't care about children or, how it affects them or whatever. You're just always going to have it. Even in America, I mean, you hear about girls that get married to older men and stuff like that. And it's just like, I mean, obviously illegally, because that's not legal. But I mean, it's still going to happen with or without the treaty. Like you can't just get rid of it totally because there's always going to be people that are just not right in the head. But I mean, at the same time, like I get what the treaty is trying to do in other countries, but I think in our country it would just make it go to the extreme
Mm-hmm.
because the other countries have bad things going on all the time, like girls getting married to to older men, and children going and having to pick up a gun at 7 years old, and child labor, and things like that. Those things are commonplace in other countries, but in America they're not. So this treaty for America would really, like, for other countries, I feel like it would be worthwhile, only because their problems are so severe that they would have to focus on those severe problems. Versus America, where our problems are, about going to church and like we were just talking about, and those would be the things that would be attacked. And I think that's just the nitpicky things is what would happen in America.
Yeah, I wonder what that effect would be in the other countries. Because like you said, I mean, like they do tend to have more of those extreme examples, particularly with children. And we have extreme examples in our country, but they are severe under our laws, and they're not so much in these other countries. So I guess it's just, but in the article they kind of made it sound like no one should be adopting this. Like this needs to be taken off of the UN. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Did it seem like that to you, where they were kind of like this is universally like a bad thing?
I wonder, like, I think they were mostly talking about it being universally bad for America specifically, but because, especially in other developed countries, like,
Right.
because developed countries have adopted this treaty, and that's what she was kind of pointing out. She was like, we can only guesstimate based on what we've seen happen in other countries and how the treaty has been interpreted in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, it's like, how do you know how it will be interpreted here by any judge? I mean, even we don't have the treaty yet, and still, like the lady's example of the kid not wanting to go to church. I mean, back in the day, if you took that to court, a judge would laugh in your face and be like, "Go to church, kid." Like, that doesn't even make it. Why is this even an issue? I mean,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? I mean, even it just back in the day, if that were to happen, like the college education thing too. I mean, back in the day, if some kid was like, "My parents won't pay for me," the judge would be like, "Too bad, so sad."
Ah. Oh, that's so true. It's just so weird.
I think we've got so sensitive in America to the littlest things. We, as a society, try to analyze things to the point of almost ludicrousy. I
Yeah.
mean, if I like backtalk my grandma when I was a kid, she would have no problem swatting me on the butt. I mean, I'm not like advocating for spanking or anything like that, but like under the treaty, and the one thing from the parental rights order was like, you will not be allowed to spank your children. And I'm like, you know what? If I
Wow.
mean, that's what some people do, and it's not like anyone's beating their kids. These are good parents that just give them swats on the butt or whatever. I mean, my parents did that. It's not. just I'm still not advocating it, but at the same time, it's little things like that where people start to like just really put the magnifying glass on it and make it seem way worse than what it really is.
Right. Um, I also think it's interesting to think. I just remember something that George Washington said, or no, it wasn't George Washington. It was, I think it was like George Washington kind of mentions it a bit, but it's also the founding fathers. So they talked about the establishment of America and how the only way that this freedom, that we can have this sort of freedom in this country, is if the majority of the people are moral and disciplined. And I think the problem we're seeing is that because some people's choices have led them to abuse their children or to do absolutely horrible things to children, then suddenly the international community says we need to get involved with the nitpicky small details of people's lives to stop them from having this happen. We need to stop um, uh, women who are getting hurt because of early pregnancies when they're young. We need to stop um, girls who are aborting their children unsafely. And we're going to do this by requiring all children to have our terms of sex education. That's what they're doing. They're saying, oh, because you guys are making the wrong decisions, we are going to get into the very details of your lives to stop it. But really, it should be the responsibility of the parents. And unfortunately, with some parents, they're not doing it. But that doesn't mean that all parents should lose their rights. That's just what they don't understand. They don't have the rights to come into our homes and say, you have no rights. Actually, I am a human being.
Hey, I have an idea. Let's make like a PRC, the rights for parents. Just because, I mean, think about it. If you taught parents, if there was like a treaty,
Yes, that's exactly what they're missing. That's so true.
parents, if there was like a treaty for parents instead of children. I mean, children can't make decisions. They're little. You can't be like, do you want to go to church? I mean, yeah, you should give them some choices in life. Like, do you want peanut butter and jelly or a ham sandwich? But I mean, to give them choices over their values and how they are brought up, and that's just mind-blowing to me, because it's like, why would I put the future of my child in their own hands? They have no idea what the world is like. They have no idea what they need to be like when they grow up. I think that as a parent, you really know best what your child should become in order to succeed in this world. Right. And honestly, it would be more effective for governments to fund programs for effective parenting rather than rights of children.
Absolutely.
I believe children should have rights in the sense that, they shouldn't be aborted just because the mom is just a floozy. I don't think that, as rights as in that, but not rights as in being able to choose their futures.
Right, isn't it interesting how they're fighting for the rights of the child, but then they're fighting for abortion laws? No, you can't have both. Oh, it's just insane. They're going against the very argument that they're going for. But anyway, so I agree with you. Why aren't we focusing on the fact that parents need to be educated about what they're doing to their children? Like the parents who are saying, oh, we need to have our child marry off young so that they can bring us money into the family. Why not educate the parents and say, these are the health costs that you're doing that to your child. Your child could eventually die from this disease of early childbirth. This is not healthy for your daughter. Why not? Why don't we do that?
Well, right, and people in other countries, they often, their young child, their young daughter, 12 years old, will wed an older man because the family needs the money. And lots of people pay, in other countries, they pay, the dowry still happens and stuff like that. So, I mean, that happens all the time in other countries. but it doesn't happen in America, and that's the point. I mean, I accept the CRC for other countries just because their issues are so extreme. But in America, it would be way more effective to fund, rather than forcing America through the CRC to fund organizations to help children in their rights, it would be way more effective to fund things that would teach parents about how to make their children, how to parent, how to just parent their children, what would be best for them. I mean, those types of services would be way more effective than your child being able to call up any social worker and being like, my mommy's making me go to church.
Right. Right. Oh, that is so interesting to really think about that. Ugh. Okay. So, do you think that the pitfalls and potential legal consequences for parents cited by parental rights in their video are an unintentional result of the vague and ambiguous language in the CRC? Why or why not? And then it says to use some research to back up claims.
Um, I think
Yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
sorry. Well, I know that that was something that I definitely noticed at first was just how broad and ambiguous every single bullet point in the CRC was. I just remember sitting there and reading it and just saying, I have absolutely no idea what specifically you can do through this. It was just like, we believe in children's rights. We believe that children should be protected. We believe that children should have the right to happiness. And it's like, yes, I believe that too. But what are you going to do to ensure that? It was just such, like, the language was so unspecific. It was just very frustrating for me, I know.
I think it's because it's supposed to be international, and they don't want to like specify things in that. I went on the UNICEF website because they were on that UN video, and I went onto their website, and they're like huge advocates for the CRC because it helps children or whatever. And I found it very interesting how there was just nothing that specific, like you said, there's nothing specific about it. It's just all about, we believe in, helping children. And in the UN thing that was the link for the UN, and it said the bullet points in there, but you're right, there was nothing like specific. And then in the video, the women were talking about the right to association or whatever, and had that example. They can hang out with whoever they want, and you can't say anything about it. And as a parent, I would be strongly against that, because I mean, kids get in with the wrong crowd, and
Right.
I mean, you can't just trust them to make the right decision. I mean, you should trust your children, but when they're in crowds, like, and they're off, if your kid wanted to join a gang and you couldn't say anything about it, but I mean, it's illegal, for crying out loud. I mean, why can't I have a say in things that are illegal? If my kid's getting in with the wrong crowd and they're doing drugs, I mean, why can't I have a say in that? That's illegal, for crying out loud. I'm trying to protect the legal system at that point.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. And it's what was oh, it's almost like that video about the man, like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like, I can be whoever I want to be. Like, it doesn't affect you, so I should just do it. And I think on The View they said the same thing. It was like, why does who I have a relationship have any effect on you? And
I
according to
thought of
the
that
biological
question a
system,
lot.
yeah. Oh, sorry, say that one more time.
I thought of that. I actually thought about that question a lot when we watched that video on The View about um and she was like, how if I marry a girl, how does that affect you or your marriage? And I'm like, well, technically it doesn't, but then like all the, and then I mean, we talked about, all the systems with the Braun Fenner Benner
Yeah.
model.
Wait. Bronfenbrenner.
Yeah, yes.
I have to practice
Yeah,
that.
I practiced it too, but it came on the spot, and it failed. Um, But you think that something's only going to affect, the microsystem, just you, when really it's not. It's
Yeah,
affecting all different systems.
absolutely. And it's frustrating to think that that's what they're advocating for. They're saying your child should have the right to associate with anyone because it's their choice. Like they should have the freedom to just do whatever they want, and it's not going to affect you. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's going to affect everybody. What this child chooses to, who that child chooses to associate with, whether they choose to come to church, like all of these different things that you feel like you can tell me I have the rights not to say to my child is actually going to affect the entire world. Which is why it's also scary to think that the CRC could have effect even in other countries.
You
Because
know,
they in fact have those rights.
yeah. You know what's so funny that I just thought of? Even if you ask someone, from any side of the argument, if you're like, do you think that one person can make a difference? Anybody would say yes. I mean, just like those two ladies, they were like, a 16-year-old girl made a difference. One person makes a difference. Then why
Right.
can't one person make a negative difference? If one person can make a positive difference for your cause, why can't one person make a negative difference based on their own decisions? I mean, it goes both ways. You can't have it one way and then be like, oh, but their decisions aren't affecting you. But it's like, but you just said that one person could make a difference in a positive way, but apparently one person can't make a difference in a negative way.
I think these are really important things to remember when we're advocating. It's just like, oh, well, so you don't believe in child rights, so you're not going to support the CRC? Oh, well, do you like so what do you think about abortion? Like, do you support child rights? Do you like really? I just think it's so interesting that they can't go the opposite direction. I love that example you had. If one person can make a difference for positive, then one person can certainly make a difference for negative. And I think that, I mean, that's just really important. I agree.
I have to run for 2 seconds to get my power cord. It's gonna die.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I think we pretty much addressed the last question.
What is the last question? Is the one about like where you've lived?
Yeah. And what it's been like in that country, the positive and negative effects, and in our country, what would be the positive and negative effects?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered that. We talked. I mean, with the nitpicky things and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, do you want me to summarize or do you want to summarize what you feel?
I'll go ahead and summarize.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so mostly we talked about how the CRC is. We talked about how it would be positive in other countries, just because, especially underdeveloped ones, specifically because of how extreme their problems are with child abuse and young children marrying young women marrying older men and all the problems that comes from that. Children being sent off to war and given weapons, and children being abused, just terrible, terrible things that happen more commonly and underdeveloped in other countries, things that don't happen in the U.S., which is why we mostly feel like the CRC would not be as helpful in the U.S. just because our problems are not as extreme, and we cited some examples. Hannah cited an example about a girl that sued her parents because they wouldn't pay for her college education, and we talked about the video how how the ladies talked about the kid suing his parents because they wanted him to go to church twice a week and he didn't want to. We talked about how the CRC would just make parents' lives more difficult. We talked about a different option and route that we could take, which is not to advocate for the specific rights of a child, which basic rights obviously are important, the right to live and stuff like that. But we also talked about how a more effective way of going about it for our government would be to have rights for parents and to have organizations that would support good parenting and teach good parenting and educate people on how to raise their children to succeed in this world, and to have good family values, and that type of an organization would be a lot more effective, especially on the growth and the development of the child. So in turn, it would be actually helping the child if we could teach parents. We talked about how if one person can make a positive effect, just like the women in the video said, how one 16-year-old girl made a positive effect, then it is possible for one person to make a negative effect. So if one person makes bad decisions, it doesn't just affect them; it affects lots of other people, and that's the main points of what we talked about.
Perfect.